A poor servant begged, "Save my dying child." The Navajo dropped his weapon and whispered, "Remain. New Mexico Territory." October 1876. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions. A sea of rust and gold under a sky so vast, it seemed to swallow hope itself. The heat had broken with the setting sun, but the cold that replaced it cut deeper, sharper, biting through threadbare cotton and worn leather like a wolf's teeth through winter hide. The wind carried with it the scent of sage and dust, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote's cry split the silence like a warning no one would heed. Eliza Crane stumbled forward, her boots catching on stones she could barely see in the dying light. Her arms ached from the weight of the bundle pressed against her chest. A small boy, wrapped in a blanket that had once been white, but was now the color of earth and blood. Benjamin, her Ben. His breath came in shallow, rattling gasps, each one weaker than the last. His skin burned beneath her touch, fever raging through his small body like wildfire through dry grass. She had been walking for 2 days, maybe 3. Time had lost all meaning somewhere between the last trading post and the endless nothing that surrounded her now. She had left the Henderson ranch in shame 3 weeks prior. Mrs. Henderson had discovered the missing silver spoons. 3 of them tucked beneath Eliza's mattress in the servants' quarters. Eliza had sworn she hadn't taken them, had begged on her knees for mercy, but the evidence was damning, and her word meant nothing against a woman of standing. The truth was simpler and crueler. The head housemaid, Margaret, had planted them there after Eliza refused the advances of Mrs. Henderson's eldest son. But truth didn't matter when you were poor, when you were nothing, when your voice carried no weight in a world built on the backs of people like you. They had thrown her out with nothing but the clothes on her back, and Benjamin wrapped in her arms. No references, no wages for the 3 months she'd worked. Just the open road and a warning never to return. She had walked east toward the settlement of Los Brazos, where she'd heard there might be work at the mission. But Benjamin had fallen ill on the 2nd day. What started as a cough became a fever, and the fever became something worse. Something that made his lips crack and bleed, that turned his eyes glassy and distant, that made him cry out in his sleep for water she didn't have. The mission had turned her away. Father Gonzalez had taken one look at Benjamin's symptoms and crossed himself, muttering about scarlet fever, about contagion, about God's will. He gave her a canteen of water and a strip of dried meat, but he would not let her stay. She understood. She didn't blame him. Fear made people cruel, and survival made them practical. So she had turned north, following a trail she'd heard mentioned once by a ranch hand, a path that led to the high country where the Navajo people lived in their traditional ways, away from the reservations, away from the soldiers, away from the world that had tried to break them. She knew the stories. Everyone did. The Navajo were dangerous, they said. Savages who raided settlements and took scalps and showed no mercy to white settlers. But Eliza had also heard other stories, whispered in the kitchens late at night by the older women who remembered things the younger generation had forgotten. Stories of Navajo healers who could cure ailments that white doctors couldn't touch. Stories of medicine men who spoke to the spirits and drew sickness from the body like poison from a wound. Desperate people believed desperate things, and Eliza Crane was beyond desperate. The sun had set completely now, leaving only the pale silver glow of a half-moon to guide her path. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, each step a battle against the weight of her child and the crushing certainty that she was too late. That she had always been too late, that Benjamin would die in her arms under a sky full of stars that didn't care whether he lived or died. She thought of his father, dead 2 years now in a mining accident that had left her alone and pregnant and scrambling for work wherever she could find it. She thought of the life she'd imagined once, foolish and young, before the world taught her that dreams were luxuries reserved for people who could afford them. Then she saw it. A flicker of orange light in the distance, small and steady against the dark landscape. A fire. Her heart seized in her chest, hope and terror warring inside her like 2 wild animals. She adjusted her grip on Benjamin and forced her legs to move faster, ignoring the screaming pain in her feet, the burning in her lungs, the dizzy weakness that threatened to pull her down into the dirt. As she drew closer, the details emerged from the shadows. A small camp nestled in a depression between two rocky outcroppings, a fire burning low and controlled. A horse tethered nearby, a beautiful paint with a dark mane that shifted nervously as she approached. And beside the fire, a figure. A man, broad-shouldered and still, his back to her as he tended something over the flames. The firelight caught the edges of his silhouette, painting him in shades of amber and shadow. Eliza's foot caught on a rock and she stumbled, gasping. The sound carried across the stillness like a gunshot. The man turned in one fluid motion, rising to his feet with a speed that seemed impossible for someone his size. In his hand, a rifle already raised and pointed directly at her chest. His eyes met hers across the distance, dark and unreadable in the firelight. She froze. Benjamin whimpered against her chest, a sound so weak it barely registered above the wind. For a long moment neither of them moved. Then the man spoke, his voice low and careful, shaped by an accent that wrapped around English words, like they were borrowed tools he'd learned to use but would never fully own. "You are lost." It wasn't a question. Eliza's voice cracked when she tried to speak. "Please." The word came out as barely more than a whisper. She tried again, forcing strength into her tone that she didn't feel. "Please, I need help. My son, he's sick. He's dying. I don't have anywhere else to go." Tears streamed down her face now, hot against her frozen cheeks. "Please, I'm begging you. Save my child." The man didn't lower his rifle. His gaze moved from her face to the bundle in her arms, lingering there for a moment that felt like eternity. Then his eyes lifted back to hers, searching for something she couldn't name. Lies, perhaps, danger, deception. She understood that too. She was a white woman, stumbling into his camp in the middle of nowhere. And history had taught his people 1,000 brutal lessons about what that could mean. "I'm alone," she said quickly, desperately. "No one else. No soldiers, no men, no one. Just me and Benjamin. He has a fever. It won't break. He can barely breathe. I heard that your people, that there are healers. I know I have no right to ask. I know what my people have done to yours. But he's just a baby. He's innocent. Please." Her voice broke completely on the last word, dissolving into a sob she couldn't contain. The man stood motionless for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then slowly, deliberately, he lowered the rifle. Not all the way, just enough to point it at the ground instead of her heart. "Come closer," he said. "To the light. Let me see the child." Eliza's legs nearly gave out with relief, but she forced herself forward, stumbling into the circle of firelight. Up close, she could see him more clearly. He was Navajo, that much was certain. His hair was long and black, tied back with a strip of leather. His face was angular, weathered by sun and wind into the kind of hardness that came from surviving in a world that wanted you dead. He wore traditional clothing, a shirt of dark wool and leather leggings, with a belt decorated in turquoise and silver. But it was his eyes that caught her. They were fierce and guarded, but not cruel. There was intelligence there and something else. Weariness, maybe? Or pain that had learned to live quietly. He gestured with the rifle toward a flat rock near the fire. "Sit!" Eliza obeyed, sinking down onto the stone with a gratitude that made her bones ache. She carefully unwrapped Benjamin from the blanket, exposing his small, feverish face to the firelight. The man crouched down beside them, setting the rifle within easy reach, but not holding it anymore. He leaned forward, studying the boy with an intensity that made Eliza's breath catch. Benjamin's lips were cracked and bleeding. His cheeks were flushed dark red, his breathing rapid and shallow. Small red spots had begun to appear on his neck and chest, spreading like a terrible constellation across his skin. The man reached out slowly, giving Eliza time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he placed 2 fingers against Benjamin's throat, feeling for the pulse. Then he touched the boy's forehead, his chest, his arms. His expression revealed nothing. "How long has he been like this?" the man asked, his voice quiet but firm. 3 days, Eliza whispered. "Maybe 4. It started as a cough. Then the fever came and it wouldn't stop. Then these spots. She gestured helplessly at Benjamin's skin. I tried everything I know. Cold water, willow bark tea, prayers. Nothing works. He's getting worse. The man nodded slowly, still studying the child. This sickness. White man's doctors have a name for it? Eliza swallowed hard. Scarlet fever. That's what the priest said. He wouldn't let us stay at the mission. Said it was too dangerous, that it could spread. The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Scarlet fever. He said the words like they tasted bitter. I have seen this before. It came with the soldiers to the reservation. It killed many children. Many mothers wept. He looked up at Eliza then, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes that looked almost like sympathy. Your son is very sick. The fever is strong. Without medicine, without care, he will not survive another night. Eliza's world tilted. She had known it, of course she had known it, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that terror couldn't quite manage. Then help him, she begged, her voice raw. Please, I'll do anything. I'll work. I'll serve you. I'll give you everything I have. Just please, don't let him die. The man was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between her face and Benjamin's. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before, almost gentle. I'm called Adohi. I'm a healer among my people, though I am far from them now. I have medicine that may help your son, herbs that can fight the fever. Knowledge passed down from my grandmother and her grandmother before her. But this will not be easy. The sickness is strong. He will need days, maybe a week of constant care. He will need warmth, water, medicine given at the right times. He will need to be watched through the night. He paused, his eyes holding hers. And you will need to stay. Eliza blinked, not understanding at first. Stay? Here, Adohi said, gesturing to the camp around them. With me, there is a place, half a day's ride north. A shelter where I have been living. It is hidden safe. There is water, firewood, space enough for 3. If you want me to heal your son, you must come there. You must remain until he is well or until... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to... Eliza looked down at Benjamin, at his small chest rising and falling with each labored breath. She thought of everything she'd lost, everything that had been taken from her. Her husband, her home, her dignity, her future. She had nothing left to lose except this one small, precious thing, this boy who carried her heart in his tiny hands. Yes, she said, her voice steady, despite the tears still streaming down her face. Yes, I'll stay. Whatever it takes. Just save him, please. Adohi studied her for another moment, then nodded once. Then we leave at first light. For now, we rest here. I will make medicine for the boy. You will drink water and eat. You are weak. If you collapse, you cannot help him. He rose and moved to his supplies, pulling out a leather pouch and a small clay pot. As he began to work, grinding herbs with practiced efficiency, Eliza watched him through exhausted, grateful eyes. She didn't know this man. Didn't know if she could trust him. Didn't know what staying with him would mean or what dangers might come. But as she looked down at Benjamin's fevered face, felt the burning heat of his skin against her palm, she realized that none of that mattered. For the first time in days, someone had offered her hope. Someone had looked at her son and seen a life worth saving. And that, in a world that had shown her nothing but cruelty, was more than she had dared to dream. Adohi returned, with a cup made from hollowed wood, filled with a steaming liquid that smelled of mint and something bitter she couldn't identify. Make him drink, he said, kneeling beside her. Small sips. It will help with the fever. Eliza took the cup with trembling hands and lifted it to Benjamin's cracked lips. The boy stirred weakly, whimpering, but she coaxed him gently until he took a small sip, then another. Adohi watched in silence, his expression unreadable. When Benjamin had drunk as much as he could manage, Adohi took the cup back and handed Eliza a strip of dried meat and a piece of hardtack. "Eat," he commanded. She wanted to refuse, wanted to focus only on Benjamin, but the look in Adohi's eyes told her he wouldn't accept argument. So she ate, each bite tasting like dust and obligation, swallowing only because she had to. Because he was right, because if she fell apart now, Benjamin would have no one. The fire crackled between them as night deepened around the camp. Somewhere in the distance, that coyote cried again, a lonely sound that seemed to echo Eliza's own heart. She pulled Benjamin closer, wrapping the blanket more tightly around him, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel something other than despair. It was fragile and tentative, this feeling. It might shatter by morning. But tonight, under a stranger's protection beside a fire in the wilderness, Eliza Crane let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, her son might live to see another sunrise. Adohi settled on the opposite side of the fire, cross-legged, his rifle resting across his knees. He didn't sleep, or if he did, it was the kind of sleep that kept one eye open, one hand ready. Eliza understood. She was a stranger here, an intruder in his solitude, and trust was something that had to be earned slowly, carefully, like coaxing a wild animal to eat from your hand. She didn't blame him for his caution. In his position, she would have done the same. "Why are you out here alone?" she asked after a while, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't know if he would answer, didn't know if she had the right to ask. But the silence between them felt heavy with unspoken questions, and she needed to fill it with something, anything, to keep from drowning in her own fears. Adohi was quiet for so long, she thought he might not respond at all. Then he spoke, his voice low and measured as if each word was chosen with care. "My people were taken to Bosque Redondo many years ago. The Long Walk, they called it. Thousands of us, forced from our homes, marched hundreds of miles to a place where the earth was poison and the water was bitter. Many died on the way, more died there. The government said it was for our own good, for our protection. They lied." His jaw tightened, and in the firelight Eliza could see the shadow of old pain crossing his face. "I was young then. I watched my father die of starvation. I watched my mother grow thin and weak until she could no longer stand. When they finally let us return to our homeland, she did not live to see it." Eliza's throat tightened. She had heard stories of Bosque Redondo, whispered accounts of the reservation where the Navajo had been imprisoned. But hearing it from someone who had lived through it made it real in a way that second-hand tales never could. "I'm sorry," she whispered, knowing the words were inadequate, knowing they could never bridge the chasm of suffering that separated his experience from her understanding. Adohi shook his head slightly. "Sorry is a word white people use when they want to feel better about things they cannot change. I do not need your sorry. I need only to live as my ancestors lived, to remember what was stolen and to survive." He looked at her then, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her want to look away, but wouldn't let her. "I left my people because I could not stay on the reservation. The boundaries felt like chains. The rations felt like charity. I am a healer, but I could not heal the sickness of despair that lived in every Hogan, every face. So I came here, to the old places, where the land still remembers us." Eliza nodded slowly, understanding more than she could articulate. She too knew what it felt like to be trapped, to be dependent on the whims of others, to have your freedom measured out in scraps and conditions. Their circumstances were different, vastly so, but the shape of their suffering had similar edges. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for telling me, for helping us." Adohi's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Your son reminds me of someone," he said, his gaze dropping to Benjamin's sleeping face. "My sister's child. He died in the second winter at Bosque Redondo. He was 3 years old. His name was Niol. It means wind." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rougher, edged with something that might have been grief, or might have been anger, or might have been both. "I could not save him. I did not have the medicine. I did not have the knowledge I have now. I was powerless." He looked back at Eliza. "I will not be powerless again." The words hung in the air between them, a promise and a confession all at once. Eliza felt something shift inside her, a recognition that went deeper than gratitude or relief. This man, This stranger who owed her nothing was offering to save her son not just out of compassion, but out of a need to redeem something he had lost, to rewrite a story that had ended in tragedy. She understood that too. She understood it in her bones. Benjamin's father, she found herself saying, surprising herself with the need to share, to offer something of her own story in return for his. His name was Thomas. He was a miner. Good man, hard worker, never drank or gambled like the others. He used to say he was going to save enough money to buy us a little piece of land somewhere, build a house with his own hands. He died when a tunnel collapsed. They didn't even bring his body up, just sealed the mine and moved on. Her voice wavered but didn't break. I was 4 months pregnant. I had no family, no money, nowhere to go. So I became a servant. I've been one ever since. Adohi listened without interruption, his face unreadable in the dancing firelight. When she finished, he nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement that felt more significant than any words could have been. They sat in silence after that. Two people who had lost too much, who had survived things that should have broken them, who had found themselves in this unlikely place at this unlikely moment, bound together by the fragile life of a sick child. The night wore on. The fire burned low. Eliza dozed fitfully, jerking awake every few minutes to check Benjamin's breathing, to feel his forehead, to reassure herself that he was still alive. Each time she woke, she found Adohi watching, alert, his presence a steady anchor in the darkness. Once, when Benjamin's breathing grew particularly labored, Adohi rose without a word and prepared another dose of the herbal medicine, helping Eliza coax it past the boy's lips with a patience that surprised her. As the first pale light of dawn began to creep across the eastern horizon, Adohi stood and began breaking camp with efficient, practiced movements. He packed his supplies, kicked dirt over the fire until only embers remained, and saddled his horse with the ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Eliza watched, holding Benjamin close, her body stiff and aching from a night spent on hard ground. "Can you ride?" Adohi asked, leading the horse toward her. Eliza nodded, though in truth she hadn't been on a horse in years, and never while carrying a child. Adohi seemed to sense her hesitation. "You will ride in front. I will hold the reins. You hold your son. If you feel weak, tell me. We will stop." It wasn't a question or a request. It was simply how things would be. He helped her mount, his hands strong and steady, as he lifted her onto the horse's back. Then he swung up behind her, settling into place with Benjamin cushioned safely between them. His arms came around on either side of her to grasp the reins, and for a moment, Eliza felt the strange intimacy of the position, the warmth of another human being at her back, the security of knowing she wasn't alone anymore. "At least not right now. We ride north," Adohi said, his breath warm against her ear. "The path is rough, but the horse is strong. Hold tight to your son. I will not let you fall." And with that he urged the horse forward, and they began their journey toward whatever waited for them in the high country, toward healing or heartbreak, toward a place hidden from the world where a Navajo healer and a desperate mother would try to save a child's life against impossible odds. The shelter appeared like a mirage against the red rock cliffs, barely visible until they were almost upon it. It was built into the side of a canyon wall, a traditional Navajo dwelling that used the natural stone as its foundation and rear wall. The front was constructed of stacked timber and adobe, weathered gray by wind and time, but solid, enduring. A small stream ran nearby, cutting a silver thread through the rust-colored earth, and juniper trees offered sparse but welcome shade. Smoke stains above a ventilation hole told Eliza this place had been used recently, lived in, cared for. Adohi dismounted first, then reached up to help Eliza down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, muscles screaming from hours in the saddle. She clutched Benjamin tighter, using him as an anchor to keep herself upright. The boy had been unconscious for most of the journey, his small body limp and burning, his breathing a shallow rasp that terrified her more with each passing hour. "Inside," Adohi said, already moving toward the dwelling. He pushed aside a blanket that served as a door, revealing an interior dimmer and cooler than the harsh sunlight outside. Eliza followed, blinking as her eyes adjusted. The space was larger than it had appeared from outside, perhaps 15 feet across. A fire pit sat in the center, its stones blackened from use. Woven blankets covered the earthen floor. Clay pots and baskets lined one wall. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the wooden beams overhead, filling the air with a sharp medicinal scent. Adohi gestured to a pallet of blankets near the far wall. "Put him there. Near the wall where it is coolest." Eliza obeyed, lowering Benjamin onto the makeshift bed with trembling arms. She knelt beside him, smoothing his damp hair back from his forehead. His skin felt like fire beneath her palm. The red rash had spread further, covering his chest and creeping up his neck toward his jaw. Adohi was already at work, moving through the space with purposeful efficiency. He built a fire quickly, coaxing flames from kindling with practiced skill. Then he filled a clay pot with water from a leather bladder and set it over the fire to heat. From the bundles hanging overhead, he selected several different herbs, laying them out on a flat stone and examining each one carefully before beginning to crush them with a smooth river rock. "What are those?" Eliza asked, her voice hoarse from dust and fear. "Cha!" Adohi replied, holding up a sage-like plant. "For purification, for driving away evil spirits that bring sickness." He selected another. "Azitzo, what you call horse mint. It fights fever, makes the body sweat out poison." A third plant, this one with small yellow flowers. Childibe, snakeweed. It strengthens the blood, helps the heart keep beating when the body is weak. He continued working as he spoke, grinding the herbs into a fine powder. "And this Kulantili, Navajo tea. For strength, for healing from the inside." Eliza watched, fascinated despite her exhaustion. She had seen white doctors work before, had watched them bleed patients and dose them with mercury and calomel, treatments that seemed to cause as much suffering as they relieved. This was different. There was a reverence in the way Adohi handled each plant, a certainty that came from generations of accumulated knowledge. He wasn't guessing. He knew. When the water began to steam, Adohi added the crushed herbs, stirring them with a wooden stick until the liquid turned dark green. He let it steep while he prepared other remedies, mixing pastes and poultices with ingredients Eliza couldn't identify. His hands moved with the confidence of long practice, measuring by instinct rather than calculation. "We must cool his body first," Adohi said, bringing over a clay bowl filled with water from the stream. "Then we give him medicine. Then we wait." He soaked a cloth in the cool water and handed it to Eliza. His forehead, his neck, his chest. "Keep the cloth cool. Change it often." Eliza took the cloth and began to work, pressing it gently against Benjamin's burning skin. The boy stirred at the touch of cold water, whimpering softly but not waking. His eyelids fluttered, revealing whites that were bloodshot and yellowed. Eliza's hands shook as she worked, fear making her clumsy. What if this didn't work? What if they had come all this way, only to watch him die anyway? "Do not think of death," Adohi said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. He knelt on the opposite side of Benjamin's pallet, his own hands steady as he prepared a poultice. "Death is patient. It does not need your thoughts to strengthen it. Think instead of life. Think of your son running, laughing. Think of him strong and well. The mind has power. Use it for healing, not for fear." Eliza nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in her throat. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself imagine Benjamin as he had been before the sickness took hold. His bright smile, his infectious laugh, the way he would reach for her with chubby hands, calling "Mama," in a voice that made everything else in the world fade away. She held that image in her mind like a talisman, a shield against the darkness that threatened to overwhelm her. Adohi applied the poultice to Benjamin's chest, spreading the thick paste across the rash with gentle precision. The mixture was dark and smelled strongly of mint and something earthier, more pungent. "This will draw out the heat," he explained. "It will pull the sickness toward the surface, where it can be released." He covered the poultice with a clean cloth, then moved to prepare the tea. The herbal mixture had cooled to a temperature that wouldn't burn, but was still warm. Adohi poured some into a small wooden cup and brought it to Benjamin's lips. The boy was too weak to swallow on his own, so Adohi supported his head with one hand while tilting tiny amounts of liquid into his mouth with the other. Most of it dribbled down Benjamin's chin, but some went down his throat. Adohi was patient, waiting between each attempt, never rushing, never forcing. How long before we know if it's working? Eliza asked, unable to keep the desperation from her voice. Adohi didn't look up from his work. The fever will fight back before it surrenders. Tonight will be the worst. His body will shake. He may cry out. He may not recognize you. This is when the spirit decides whether to stay or to leave. We can only make the choice easier by keeping the body strong. The word sent ice through Eliza's veins, but she forced herself to nod, to accept the truth of what was coming. What do I do? You stay with him, Adohi said simply. You talk to him. You touch him. You remind his spirit that there is a reason to stay. I will prepare more medicine. I will keep the fire going. I will watch. But you are his mother. Your voice is the one he knows best. Your touch is what will anchor him when the fever tries to pull him away. Eliza settled herself more comfortably beside Benjamin, one hand resting on his small chest where she could feel the rapid flutter of his heartbeat. She began to talk, softly, continuously, telling him stories she remembered from her own childhood. She sang him the lullabies her mother had sung to her, songs she thought she'd forgotten until the words came flowing back. She told him about his father, about the man he'd never gotten to know, painting pictures with words of Thomas's kindness, his strength, his dreams for their future. Hours passed. The light outside shifted from harsh morning brightness to the softer gold of afternoon. Adohi moved around the dwelling with quiet efficiency, tending the fire, preparing fresh poultices, brewing more tea. He brought Eliza food, simple fare of dried meat and cornmeal cakes, insisting she eat even when she protested that she couldn't. Your son needs you strong, he said, and that was enough to make her choke down the food. As evening approached, Benjamin's condition worsened. The fever spiked higher, making his skin so hot it hurt to touch. He began to thrash weakly, his head rolling from side to side, small sounds of distress escaping his cracked lips. Eliza held him as gently as she could, trying to keep him still without restraining him, her own tears falling onto his fevered skin. It's starting, Adohi said, moving to kneel beside them. He had prepared fresh medicine, stronger this time, and he helped Eliza get it into Benjamin, despite the boy's resistance. The fever will burn itself out, or it will burn him out. All we can do now is wait and watch. The night that followed was the longest of Eliza's life. Benjamin cycled through periods of violent shaking and deathly stillness. Sometimes he would cry out, incoherent sounds that might have been words or might have been pure pain. Other times he lay so still that Eliza had to put her ear against his chest to confirm he was still breathing. She never left his side, not even when exhaustion made her vision blur and her body scream for rest. Adohi stayed awake as well, feeding the fire, replacing the cooling cloths on Benjamin's skin, administering medicine at precise intervals. He worked with a focused intensity that never wavered, his movements economical and sure. Once, when Benjamin's breathing became so shallow it seemed he might stop altogether, Adohi performed a chant, his voice low and rhythmic, filled with words Eliza didn't understand, but that seemed to vibrate through the air like something alive and powerful. "What are you saying?" Eliza whispered when the chant ended. "I'm asking the holy people to look favorably on this child," Adohi replied. "I am reminding them that he is innocent, that he has done no harm to anyone, that his path has just begun. I'm asking them to give him more time to walk in beauty on this earth." Eliza felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. "Do you think they're listening?" Adohi's eyes met hers across Benjamin's small body. "I think the universe listens to all prayers, whether it chooses to answer them or not. But prayer is not just about asking. It is about opening yourself to whatever comes. It is about accepting that some things are beyond our control while still fighting for what we can control. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Near midnight, something shifted. Benjamin's thrashing subsided. His breathing, while still labored, found a more regular rhythm. The terrible heat of his skin began to ease, just slightly, just enough to notice. Eliza hardly dared to hope, but Adohi's expression changed, the hard lines around his mouth softening almost imperceptibly. "The fever is breaking," he said quietly. "Not gone, but breaking. This is good." He prepared a new medicine, this one gentler, designed to sustain rather than fight. "He's not safe yet. The next days will tell us if the sickness has damaged his body in ways we cannot see. But he has survived the worst of it. His spirit has chosen to stay." Eliza let out a sob of relief, so powerful it shook her entire body. She bent over Benjamin, pressing her forehead to his, whispering thank you over and over again, to God, to Adohi, to whatever forces in the universe had decided her son deserved to live. Adohi placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of comfort that was over almost before it began, then rose to tend the fire. As dawn approached, painting the sky beyond the dwelling's entrance in shades of pink and gold, Eliza finally allowed herself to close her eyes. Benjamin slept peacefully beside her, his breathing steady, his fever diminished to a manageable warmth. She could hear Adohi moving quietly around the space, cleaning up the remnants of their long night's battle, preparing something that smelled like food. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the doorway, and Benjamin was looking at her. His eyes were clear, truly clear for the first time in days. "Mama," he whispered, his voice weak but unmistakable. Eliza's heart nearly burst. She gathered him into her arms, careful of his fragile state, and held him close, breathing in the scent of him, feeling the solid reality of him alive and aware and with her. "You're going to be okay," she whispered into his hair. "You're going to be okay, my darling boy." Over Benjamin's head, she met Adohi's eyes. He was standing near the fire, watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was satisfaction there, yes, but also something else, something that looked almost like pain. Before she could ask, he turned away, busying himself with the morning meal. But Eliza had seen it, had recognized it, the look of a man who had saved a life, and in doing so, had remembered all the lives he couldn't save. She understood that look. She wore it herself sometimes, when she allowed herself to think about all the losses, all the failures, all the moments when she hadn't been enough. They were more alike than she had realized. She and this Navajo healer who had given her back her son. Benjamin dozed off again, and Eliza carefully laid him back on the pallet. She rose on shaky legs, her body stiff and sore, and moved toward where Adohi was preparing food. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate but all she had. "You saved his life. I can never repay you for that." Adohi shook his head. "You do not owe me payment. This is what a healer does. This is my purpose." He handed her a bowl of something warm and aromatic, a corn-based porridge with herbs mixed in. "And you must regain your strength. Your son will need you in the days to come. He is not yet well enough to travel, to be moved. You will both stay here until he can walk on his own, until the sickness is completely gone from his body." Eliza took the bowl, then hesitated. "How long will that be?" "A week, perhaps more," Adohi replied. "Maybe less if he heals quickly. But we will not rush it. We will not risk having the fever return because we were impatient. A week." The reality of it settled over Eliza like a blanket, heavy with implications. A week living here, in this dwelling, with this man she barely knew. A week of dependence, of owing him not just gratitude, but her very presence in his space, his life. She thought she should feel uncomfortable with that, should feel afraid, or at least cautious. But looking at Adohi's face, at the steadiness in his dark eyes, all she felt was safe. "Then we'll stay," she said quietly. "As long as you'll have us." Adohi nodded once, a gesture that seemed to contain an entire conversation they hadn't yet had. "Then you stay," he said simply, and turned back to his work. Outside, the desert was waking up, birds calling to each other in the juniper trees, the stream singing its endless song over smooth stones. Inside the dwelling, a sick child slept peacefully while his mother ate her first real meal in days, and a healer who had lost too much began to remember what it felt like to save something precious. The days ahead would bring their own challenges, their own revelations, their own moments of connection and conflict. But for now, in this moment, there was only the quiet satisfaction of a battle won, a life preserved, and the tentative beginning of something neither of them had expected to find. The days took on a rhythm that felt almost normal, though nothing about their situation was ordinary. Benjamin improved slowly but steadily, his fever breaking completely by the third day, the angry rash fading to pale pink marks that would eventually disappear. He was weak, barely able to sit up without help, but his eyes were bright again and he smiled when Eliza sang to him. That smile was worth more than all the gold in California. Eliza found herself settling into the patterns of survival that this place demanded. She learned where Adohi kept his stores of dried corn and beans, how to grind the corn into meal using the flat stone and handheld mano he showed her. She learned to build the fire the way he did, with careful attention to airflow and fuel, so it burned hot and clean without filling the dwelling with smoke. She learned which herbs were for cooking and which were for medicine, though she didn't dare touch the latter without his permission. Adohi was gone for hours each day, returning with firewood or fresh water or game he'd hunted. He brought back a rabbit on the fourth day, already skinned and cleaned, and showed Eliza how to prepare it over the fire with wild onions and a herb she didn't recognize. The meat was lean and gamey but delicious, the first fresh protein she'd tasted in weeks. Benjamin managed a few small bites, his appetite returning gradually as his strength did. They spoke little during those first days, their conversations limited to practical matters. Where should she put the water bladders? How often should Benjamin take the medicine? Was it safe to let him sit up? But there was a comfort in the silence between them, a lack of pressure to fill every moment with words. Eliza had lived in houses where silence meant anger, meant someone was displeased or punishing her with their coldness. This silence was different. It felt respectful, peaceful even. On the fifth evening, as they sat on opposite sides of the fire after Benjamin had fallen asleep, Adohi spoke without preamble. "You should know that soldiers come through this country sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. They are looking for Navajo who left the reservation without permission. If they find me here, they will try to take me back. They may try to arrest me." He looked at her directly, his face serious in the firelight. "If they find you here with me, they will ask questions. They will want to know why a white woman is living with a Navajo man. The answers you give could mean danger for both of us." Eliza's stomach tightened. She had been so focused on Benjamin's recovery that she hadn't thought about the larger implications of their situation, hadn't considered how it would appear to outsiders. A white woman and a Navajo man living alone together in the wilderness. The conclusions people would draw would be ugly, dangerous for both of them, but especially for Adohi. "What should I say if they come?" she asked quietly. Adohi was silent for a moment, staring into the flames. "You could say I am your guide, that you hired me to lead you through the territory. You could say your son was sick and I am helping you until he is well enough to travel. These things are close enough to true that you could say them without lying." He paused. "Or you could say nothing. You could hide when they come, take your son into the canyon where they will not find you, and I will send them away. But that would require you to trust me completely, to trust that I would not tell them where you are." "I do trust you," Eliza said, the words coming out before she'd fully thought them through. But once spoken, she realized they were true. This man had saved her son's life, had opened his home to them, had asked nothing in return. If she couldn't trust him, she couldn't trust anyone. "You've given me no reason not to." Something shifted in Adohi's expression, a subtle softening that might have been surprise or might have been relief. "Trust is not something my people give easily to yours anymore," he said. We have learned that white men's promises are like morning dew. They appear solid but disappear when tested. But you are different from the others I have known. You do not look at me like I am something less than human. You do not treat this place like it belongs to you simply because you are here." Eliza looked down at her hands, worn and calloused from years of hard work. "I know what it's like to be treated as less than," she said quietly. "Maybe not the same way, but I know the feeling. I've been invisible my whole life. Just a servant, just a poor woman, just someone to be used and discarded when they're done with you." She looked back up at him. "You're the first person in a long time who's treated me like I matter, like my son's life is worth saving, even though we can't pay you, even though helping us puts you at risk. So yes, I trust you, completely." The fire crackled between them, sending sparks spiraling up toward the smoke hole. Adohi held her gaze for a long moment, and Eliza felt something pass between them, an understanding that went beyond words. They were both outcasts in their own ways, both people the world had tried to break, and somehow they had found each other in this isolated place where the rules of the outside world didn't quite reach. "My wife died 3 years ago," Adohi said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise him as much as they surprised Eliza. Her name was Desba. It means goes to war. She was fierce, strong, the best weaver in our band. She made blankets so beautiful that traders would offer twice the normal price for them. His voice grew softer, more distant. She got sick during the second winter after we returned from Bosque Redondo. A coughing sickness that white doctors call consumption. I tried everything I knew, every medicine, every ceremony. Nothing worked. She grew thinner and weaker until one morning she simply stopped breathing. Eliza's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "We had no children," Adohi continued. "She wanted them, but they never came. She said the years at Bosque Redondo had broken something inside her, that the starvation and sickness had taken away her ability to create life. It hurt her deeply. She felt she had failed me, failed our people who needed children to survive, to continue. I told her she was enough, that I did not need children to make my life complete, but she never believed me." He paused, his jaw working. "When she died, I left the reservation. I could not stay there anymore. Everywhere I looked, I saw her. I heard her voice in every wind, saw her face in every fire. So I came here, to the old places, where the ancestors walk and the land remembers a time before reservations, before soldiers, before everything changed." Eliza understood now why he had helped them, why he had taken the risk of bringing strangers into his sanctuary. He was trying to save what he couldn't save before, trying to fill the emptiness left by all his losses with something that felt like purpose, like redemption. "She would be proud of you," Eliza said softly, "for what you did for Benjamin, for using your gifts to help others even when it costs you." Adohi's eyes glistened in the firelight, though whether with tears or just reflection Eliza couldn't tell. "Perhaps," he said. "Or perhaps she would tell me I am a fool for risking myself for outsiders, for people who are not my responsibility." Desba was practical about survival. She understood that sometimes you must be hard to stay alive. "But you're not hard," Eliza said. "You pretend to be, but you're not. A hard man would have turned us away that first night. A hard man wouldn't have stayed up for days taking care of a sick child that wasn't his own. A hard man wouldn't have shared his home and his food and his medicine with strangers." She smiled slightly. "I think your wife would understand that being strong doesn't mean being cruel. It means having the courage to be kind, even when the world tells you kindness is weakness." Adohi looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are wise for someone so young," he said. "The world has not yet beaten all the hope out of you." "I'm not that young," Eliza replied. "I'm 24, though I feel twice that most days. And I'm not sure if what I have is hope or just stubbornness. But I've learned that giving up is the only way to guarantee you lose. As long as you keep fighting, keep trying, there's at least a chance things might get better." They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing more easily than it had before. Adohi told her about his childhood, about learning healing arts from his grandmother, who was renowned throughout their territory as a medicine woman. He described the traditional ways of his people, the ceremonies and songs, the relationship with the land that went back countless generations. He spoke of the long walk with a pain that was still raw despite the years, describing the forced march, the inadequate rations, the soldiers who treated them like cattle being driven to slaughter. Eliza shared her own story in greater detail, talking about her brief marriage to Thomas, about the joy of those few years when she had believed life could be good and stable. She spoke of his death, the crushing weight of suddenly being alone and pregnant, with no resources, no family to turn to. She described the series of positions she'd held as a servant, some better than others, but all marked by the fundamental inequality of her station. She told him about Margaret's betrayal at the Henderson Ranch, about the silver spoons she'd never stolen, about how quickly Mrs. Henderson had been willing to believe the worst of her. "People see what they expect to see," Adohi said when she finished. "Your Mrs. Henderson expected servants to steal, so when she was told you stole, she believed it without question. Just as white settlers expect Navajo to be violent and dangerous, so when we defend our land, they call it savagery and use it to justify taking more from us. The powerful always find ways to blame the powerless for their own sins. How do you live with the anger?" Eliza asked. "How do you keep going when the world is so unjust?" Adohi was quiet for a moment. "I remember that anger is a fire. It can keep you warm in the cold times, give you strength when you are weak. But if you let it burn too hot, it consumes everything, including yourself. So I use it when I need it, then I put it aside and focus on what I can control. I cannot change what happened to my people. I cannot bring back those who died, but I can live in the old ways as much as possible. I can preserve the knowledge my grandmother gave me. I can help those who come to me seeking healing. These small things are my resistance." Eliza nodded slowly, understanding. Her own form of resistance had been simply refusing to break, refusing to become bitter and cruel, despite everything that had happened to her. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a way of saying that the world didn't get to define who she was, that she still had some small measure of control over her own spirit, even when everything else had been taken from her. The fire burned down to embers, and the night grew cold. Adohi rose to add more wood, and Eliza checked on Benjamin, finding him sleeping peacefully, his breathing deep and regular. When she returned to the fire, Adohi was preparing something, heating water in a clay pot. "Navajo tea," he said. "It will help you sleep. You have not been resting enough. I see you wake every hour to check on your son. Your body needs more than that." "I can't help it," Eliza admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I'm afraid I'll wake up and he'll be worse again, that the fever will come back. I keep thinking this is all temporary, that something will go wrong and I'll lose him anyway." Adohi poured the tea into 2 wooden cups and handed her one. "Fear is natural, but you must trust that the healing is real. The fever is gone. The sickness has left his body. He grows stronger every day. You have already won this battle, but you continue to fight as if the enemy is still here. This will exhaust you until you have nothing left to give." Eliza sipped the tea, its warmth spreading through her chest. It had a pleasant, slightly sweet taste with earthy undertones. "I'll try," she said, "but I can't promise I'll succeed. Letting go of fear isn't as easy as deciding to do it." "No," Adohi agreed. "It is not easy, but you can practice. Tonight, when you lie down to sleep, I will stay awake. I will watch over your son. If anything changes, anything at all, I will wake you immediately. But I do not think anything will change. I think he will sleep through the night peacefully, and so should you. Can you trust me to do this?" Eliza looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the genuine concern not just for Benjamin, but for her as well. When had anyone last cared about whether she got enough rest, whether she was taking care of herself? She couldn't remember. "Yes," she said softly, "I can trust you." That night, for the first time since Benjamin had fallen ill, Eliza slept deeply and without interruption. She didn't wake every hour to check his breathing. She didn't jerk awake at every small sound. She simply slept, her body finally accepting that it was safe to rest, that someone else was keeping watch, that she didn't have to carry everything alone. When she woke in the morning, sunlight was streaming through the doorway, and Benjamin was sitting up, playing with a small carved figure Adohi must have given him. Adohi himself was exactly where he'd been when she fell asleep, sitting cross-legged by the fire, alert and watchful. "You didn't sleep at all," Eliza said, guilt flooding through her. Adohi shrugged. "I have gone longer without sleep." "And you needed rest more than I did. Your son is doing well. He ate some cornmeal porridge this morning and asked for water 3 times. These are good signs. His strength is returning." He stood, stretching muscles that must have been stiff from sitting still for hours. "Today, if the weather is good, you should take him outside for a short time. Let him sit in the sun, breathe fresh air. It will help his healing." Eliza nodded, then made a decision. "Tonight you sleep and I'll keep watch." "It's only fair." Adohi started to protest, but she held up a hand. "You said I should trust the healing is real, that Benjamin is out of danger. If that's true, then there's no reason you need to exhaust yourself staying awake every night. We'll take turns. That's how this works." For a moment, Adohi looked like he might argue. Then his expression softened and he nodded. "You are right. We take turns. This is fair." It was a small thing, this agreement, but it felt significant. It was an acknowledgement that they were partners in this situation, equals, despite their different backgrounds and skills. It was a recognition that both their contributions mattered, that neither of them was simply serving the other. They were working together, building something that looked almost like friendship in the space between their separate worlds. That afternoon, Eliza carried Benjamin outside for the first time in over a week. The sun was warm on her face, the air crisp and clean. She sat on a flat rock near the stream, settling Benjamin in her lap, and let him watch the water flow past. He pointed at birds, at clouds, at the red rocks towering above them, his voice weak but excited as he tried to name everything he saw. Eliza held him close, breathing in the scent of his hair, feeling the solid weight of him alive and curious and well. Adohi worked nearby, repairing a section of the dwelling's wall where the adobe had cracked. Eliza watched him move, efficient and skilled, and found herself thinking about how different he was from what she'd been taught to expect. The stories she'd heard about Navajo men painted them as warriors, as threats, as people to be feared and avoided. But Adohi was a healer, a man who built shelters and tended fires and saved children's lives. He was gentle with Benjamin, patient with her questions, thoughtful in his speech. He was, she realized with some surprise, one of the best men she'd ever known. That realization should have frightened her, should have raised all kinds of warnings about the impropriety of such thoughts, about the dangers of seeing him as anything other than a temporary ally in a desperate situation. But Eliza found she didn't care about those warnings. She had spent too much of her life worrying about what other people thought, following rules that served everyone except her. Out here, in this hidden canyon, those rules felt distant and meaningless. What mattered was that Benjamin was alive, that they had shelter and food and someone who cared about their well-being. Everything else was just noise. As the sun began to set, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and gold, Eliza carried Benjamin back inside. Adohi had prepared another meal, this time a stew made with dried beans and wild herbs. They ate together, the 3 of them, passing the wooden bowls back and forth, sharing the food in companionable silence. Benjamin fell asleep shortly after, exhausted by his brief adventure outside. Eliza covered him carefully with a blanket, then settled by the fire across from Adohi. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For saving him, for letting us stay, for being patient with us. I know we've disrupted your life. I know this isn't what you wanted when you came out here to be alone. But you've treated us with nothing but kindness, and I want you to know that I see it, that I appreciate it more than I can say." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Adohi looked at her across the flames, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "You have not disrupted my life," he said slowly. "You have reminded me that I still have a purpose. For months I have been here alone, talking to no one, healing no one, simply existing from one day to the next. I told myself I was preserving traditions, maintaining the old ways, but really I was just hiding. You and your son, you have given me a reason to use my gifts again. You have reminded me what it feels like to fight for something, to succeed at something that matters. If anyone should be grateful, it is me." Their eyes held across the fire, and Eliza felt something shift between them, something that had been building since that first night when he had lowered his rifle and let them into his camp. It wasn't romance, not exactly, not yet. It was something deeper and more fundamental. It was recognition. It was two people who had been alone for too long, suddenly realizing they didn't have to be alone anymore. That despite all the reasons the world said they shouldn't fit together, somehow they did. Benjamin was strong enough to walk short distances by the 9th day, his legs wobbly but determined as he toddled around the dwelling under Eliza's watchful eye. The rash had faded completely, leaving only faint pink marks that Adohi assured her would disappear entirely within a few weeks. The boy's appetite had returned with a vengeance, and he demanded food constantly, a sign of health that made Eliza's heart swell with relief every time he asked for more. But with Benjamin's recovery came a new tension that neither Eliza nor Adohi spoke about directly. The reason for staying was disappearing. Soon Benjamin would be well enough to travel, and then what? Where would they go? Eliza had no money, no prospects, no home waiting for her. The thought of returning to the world outside this canyon filled her with a dread she couldn't quite name. Out there she was nobody. Out there the rules that protected some people and crushed others would apply again. Out there she would be alone. She was grinding corn one morning when she heard horses. Multiple horses moving fast. Adohi heard them too. He was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the rifle that was never far from reach. "Inside," he said, his voice sharp with urgency. "Take Benjamin to the back of the dwelling. Cover yourselves with blankets. Do not make a sound, no matter what you hear. Do you understand?" Eliza's blood turned to ice. She scooped up Benjamin, ignoring his protests, and moved quickly to the back corner of the dwelling. She pulled blankets over them both, creating a dark cocoon that smelled of smoke and herbs. Through a gap in the fabric, she could see Adohi moving to the doorway, the rifle held loosely but ready. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The horses stopped outside, voices rough and male, speaking English. "You there, Indian? Come on out where we can see you proper." Adohi stepped through the doorway, and Eliza's view was blocked. She clutched Benjamin tighter, one hand over his mouth to keep him quiet. The boy seemed to sense the danger, his body going still against hers. "I am Adohi," she heard him say, his English more formal than usual, carefully pronounced. "I live here alone. I hunt, I gather plants, I disturb no one." "Alone, huh?" A different voice, older, with the tone of someone used to being obeyed. "That's interesting, because we got a report from a trader that he saw smoke from this canyon. More smoke than one man would make, and we found tracks, fresh tracks, coming up from the south. Small feet like a woman's. You want to explain that?" "It just is Eliza's breath caught. They knew. Somehow they knew she was here. She could hear the accusation in the soldier's voice, the trap being laid. If Adohi admitted she was here, they would want to know why. They would assume ugly things. If he lied and they found her anyway, it would be worse. "I had visitors," Adohi said calmly. "A woman and her sick child. They stayed 3 days while I treated the boy's fever. They left 2 days ago, heading east toward Los Brazos. I gave them food and directions. They were grateful." His voice was steady, giving away nothing. "That's so." The older voice again, skeptical. "And you just helped them out of the goodness of your heart? Didn't ask for nothing in return?" "I am a healer," Adohi replied. "It is my duty to help those who are sick, regardless of who they are." The child had scarlet fever. He would have died without medicine. The mother had no money, but I did not need money. I needed only to do what is right. There was a long pause. Eliza could hear someone moving, boots on hard ground, getting closer to the dwelling. Mind if we take a look inside, just to confirm your story? I mind, Adohi said, and there was steel in his voice now. This is my home. You have no right to enter without cause. I've broken no laws. I have harmed no one. I'm on land that was promised to my people by treaty. You are the trespassers here, not me. Watch your tone, Indian. The younger voice, aggressive. We're U.S. Army. We go where we want, when we want. Now step aside, or we'll move you aside. Eliza heard the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked. Her whole body went rigid with terror. They were going to shoot him. They were going to kill Adohi because he wouldn't let them violate his home, and it would be her fault, her and Benjamin's fault for being here. You can shoot me, Adohi said quietly, but that will not change the truth. There is no woman here. There is no child here. There is only me and my home, and the memory of my wife, who died on the reservation you forced us onto. If you want to add my death to the long list of crimes your government has committed against my people, go ahead. But know that I will be one more ghost haunting your conscience, one more reason the spirits of this land will never forgive what you have done. The silence that followed was absolute. Eliza barely dared to breathe. Benjamin squirmed against her, and she held him tighter, willing him to stay quiet just a little longer. Finally, the older voice spoke again, but the tone had changed, become less certain. Stand down, Private. We're not here to start an incident over nothing. A pause. You, Adohi, you're supposed to be on the reservation. You know that, right? You're technically in violation of federal policy being out here. The reservation is a prison, Adohi said flatly. I was told we could return to our homeland after Bosque Redondo. This is my homeland. These canyons, these rocks, this water. My ancestors are buried here. My wife's ashes are scattered here. I am home. If that is a crime, then I am guilty. Another long pause. Then, we're watching this area. If we get more reports of activity, we'll be back with more men and a warrant to search wherever we damn well please. You'd be smart to keep your head down, stay out of trouble. The sounds of boots retreating, of men mounting horses. And if you see that woman and her kid again, you tell them to get themselves to a proper town. The territory's no place for a woman alone with a child. Apache's been raiding up north. She's lucky she made it this far. The horses rode off, the sound of hooves gradually fading into the distance. Eliza waited, every muscle locked, until she heard Adohi's voice. They are gone. You can come out. She threw off the blankets and stumbled to her feet. Benjamin clutched in her arms. Adohi stood in the doorway, the rifle still in his hands, staring out at the empty landscape. His shoulders were rigid with tension. You lied for us, Eliza said, her voice shaking. You could have told them the truth. You could have let them see we were here. It would have been easier for you. Adohi turned to look at her, and his expression was harder than she'd ever seen it. Easier how? You think they would have accepted that I was simply helping a sick child? You think they would have believed there was nothing improper happening here? He set the rifle down with more force than necessary. They would have assumed I kidnapped you, or worse. They would have arrested me, maybe killed me. And you, they would have questioned you, humiliated you, spread rumors about you that would follow you wherever you went. Easier for who? Eliza set Benjamin down, her legs trembling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you in danger. I didn't think about soldiers, about people looking for us. You could not have known, Adohi said, his voice softening slightly. But now you do know. They will be watching. They will be looking for signs of activity here, which means you cannot stay much longer. It is not safe, not for any of us. The words hit Eliza like a physical blow. She had known it was coming, had felt it approaching like a storm on the horizon, but hearing it said out loud made it real. Where will we go? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. I have no money, no references. No one will hire me with a child and no husband. And after what happened at the Henderson Ranch, if anyone checks my background, they'll hear I'm a thief. "I'm marked, Adohi. There's no place for people like me." Adohi was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was wrestling with something internal. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "There is a mission in Santa Fe. The sisters there help women who have nowhere else to go. They provide work, shelter, food. They do not ask too many questions about the past. It is 3 days' ride from here, maybe 4 with a child. I could take you there, make sure you arrive safely." "A mission," Eliza repeated dully. "More charity, more being at the mercy of others' goodwill, more being grateful for scraps, while knowing she was one mistake away from being thrown out again." But what choice did she have? "When would we leave?" "Soon," Adohi said. 2 days, maybe 3. Long enough to prepare supplies for your son to regain a bit more strength. But not longer. The soldiers will send scouts. They will want to confirm my story. If they find evidence of you here, of a woman and child staying for more than a few days, they will come back with reinforcements." Eliza nodded, swallowing against the tightness in her throat. 2 days, then. She picked up Benjamin, who had started to fuss, and carried him outside, needing air, needing space to think. The canyon walls felt closer than before, the sky smaller. Freedom, she was learning, was always temporary for people like her. Just when you started to feel safe, started to believe you might have found a place to rest, the world reminded you that you didn't belong anywhere. She sat by the stream, letting Benjamin splash in the shallow water under her supervision. The boy laughed, delighted by the way the water caught the sunlight, and the sound was so pure, so innocent, that it made Eliza want to cry. He had no idea how precarious their situation was. He didn't understand that they were about to lose the closest thing to a home they'd had in months. He just knew he was alive and the world was full of interesting things to explore. "I envy you," she whispered to him. "I wish I could see the world the way you do. Like every day is a gift, and there's nothing to worry about beyond the next meal and the next game." Benjamin looked up at her, water dripping from his small hands, and smiled. That smile broke something in Eliza's chest, some dam she'd been holding in place through sheer force of will. Tears came, hot and fast, and she let them fall. She cried for everything she'd lost. Her husband, her home, her dignity, her sense of safety in the world. She cried for the unfairness of it all, for the way poverty and powerlessness made every day a battle just to survive. She cried for Benjamin, who deserved better than a mother who could barely keep them fed and sheltered. And she cried for something she hadn't fully acknowledged until this moment. She cried because leaving Adohi felt like losing something precious before she'd even had a chance to understand what it was. "Your mother weeps," a voice said softly. Adohi had approached so quietly she hadn't heard him. He sat down on a rock nearby, not too close, respecting her space, but offering his presence. These are healing tears, I think, the kind that wash away poison that has built up too long inside. Eliza wiped at her face with the back of her hand. "I'm tired," she said. "I'm so tired of fighting, of never knowing if tomorrow I'll have food or shelter, or if some new disaster will take away whatever small bit of security I've managed to build. I'm tired of being afraid all the time." She looked at him. "These past days, living here with you, it's the first time in years I haven't been afraid. Even when the soldiers came, even then, I knew you wouldn't let them hurt us. I trusted you completely. And now we have to leave, and I don't know if I'll ever feel that safe again." Adohi's expression was pained. "I wish I could offer you more. I wish I could say, stay here, make this your home, let me protect you and your son. But you see now why that is impossible. The soldiers will not forget. They will watch this place. And if they find you here, if they discover a white woman living with a Navajo man, the consequences will be severe for both of us, but especially for me. They will assume I have done something wrong, something criminal. They will not believe it is simply kindness, simply one person helping another. The world we live in does not allow for such simple explanations." "I know," Eliza said bitterly. I know the world is cruel and unfair and full of people who judge without understanding. I know that what we have here, this peace, this sense of being safe, it's an illusion. It can't last because society won't let it last. But that doesn't make it easier to accept. They sat in silence for a while, watching Benjamin play in the water. The sun was warm on Eliza's face, the sound of the stream soothing. She tried to memorize this moment, this feeling of being exactly where she needed to be, with people who cared about her. She wanted to carry it with her when they left, wanted to be able to close her eyes months or years from now, and remember what it felt like to not be alone. "I will miss you," Adohi said quietly. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with all the things he wasn't saying, all the feelings that couldn't be expressed given the impossibility of their situation. "I will miss your son's laughter. I will miss your questions about the herbs, the way you listen when I explain things. I will miss having someone to cook for, someone to share the fire with in the evenings. This dwelling will feel very empty when you are gone." Eliza turned to look at him, really look at him. His profile was strong against the bright sky, his long dark hair moving slightly in the breeze. He was a good man, a better man than most she'd known who claimed to be civilized and righteous. He had saved her son's life and asked nothing in return. He had shared his home and his knowledge and his protection. He had treated her with respect and kindness at a time when she desperately needed both. And now she was going to leave him, return him to the isolation he'd sought out after his wife's death, and he would be alone again. "Come with us," she heard herself say. The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. "What?" "Come with us to Santa Fe," Eliza said, the idea gaining shape and substance even as she spoke it. "Don't stay here waiting for soldiers to harass you, waiting for the next person to stumble into your camp. Come with us. You could work as a healer in the city. People need medicine, need someone with your knowledge. You could help people and be safe from soldiers who want to force you back to the reservation." Adohi shook his head slowly. "I cannot live in a white man's city. I would not be welcomed there, not as anything more than a curiosity or a servant. And I would lose what little connection I have left to my people, to my traditions. Here at least I am living in the way my ancestors lived. Here I am still Navajo, still following the path I was taught. In Santa Fe, I would be just another Indian trying to fit into a world that does not want me." "You're alone here," Eliza pressed, knowing she was being selfish but unable to stop herself. "You said yourself you've been hiding, just existing. Is that really better than taking a risk on something different, something that might give you purpose again?" Adohi met her eyes, and there was something in his gaze that made her breath catch. "Are you asking me to come to Santa Fe for my sake or for yours?" The question hung between them, too honest, too direct. Eliza opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. What was she asking? What did she want from this man who had already given her so much? She didn't know. She only knew that the thought of leaving him behind felt wrong in a way she couldn't articulate. Wrong, like tearing a piece out of something that had just started to become whole. Before she could formulate an answer, Benjamin squealed with delight, splashing water high into the air. The moment broke, and Eliza turned her attention back to her son, to the immediate and manageable task of keeping him entertained and safe. But the question remained, unspoken now but not forgotten, hovering in the space between them like a door that had been opened just a crack, letting in light but not yet allowing passage. That night, after Benjamin was asleep, they sat by the fire as had become their habit. But the easy companionship of previous evenings was strained now, complicated by the looming departure and the conversation by the stream. Adohi worked on repairing a leather satchel, his hands moving with practiced skill. Eliza watched the flames, her mind churning through possibilities and impossibilities. "Tell me about the mission," she said finally. "The one in Santa Fe. What are the sisters like?" Adohi set down the satchel. "I have only met them once, when they came to the reservation to provide medical supplies. They are Catholics, very devout, but not cruel like some missionaries I have known. Sister Maria, the one who leads them, she believes in helping people without trying to change who they are. She gave medicine to our people without demanding they give up their beliefs, without insisting they convert. That is rare. Most white people want to save our souls before they will save our bodies. Will they accept Benjamin and me? Will they believe I'm worthy of their help? They will believe you are in need, Adohi said. That is enough for them. They do not judge. They simply serve. You will have to work, of course. They will expect you to earn your keep. But the work will be fair, and you will be treated with dignity. It is not a perfect solution, but it is better than many alternatives you would face on your own. Eliza nodded, trying to feel grateful, trying to summon enthusiasm for this plan that would give her and Benjamin a safe place to land. But all she could feel was a hollow ache in her chest, a sense of loss for something she'd never really had. And what will you do after you leave us there? Will you come back here? Adohi was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost reluctant. I do not know. Perhaps I will return here. Perhaps I will go somewhere else. Perhaps I will finally do what I should have done years ago and rejoin my people on the reservation, accept the reality of our situation instead of clinging to dreams of living as we once did. He looked at her across the fire. Your question today by the stream. You asked me to come with you. Why? Eliza's heart hammered. This was dangerous territory, conversations that could lead to admissions neither of them was ready to make. But she was tired of hiding, tired of pretending she didn't feel things, simply because feeling them was inconvenient. Because I don't want to say goodbye, she said honestly. Because in the short time we've known each other, you've become important to me in a way I can't fully explain. Because when I think about the future, I want you in it, even though I have no right to want that, even though it makes no sense given our circumstances. Adohi's expression was unreadable in the firelight. You know this is impossible. We come from different worlds. Your people and mine. We are enemies in the eyes of most. If we tried to build something together, a life together, we would face hatred and suspicion everywhere we went. Your son would suffer for it. You would suffer for it. Is that really what you want? No, Eliza admitted. But I also don't want to pretend I don't care about you just because caring is difficult. I don't want to walk away and spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been if we'd been braver, if we'd been willing to face the hatred and suspicion together instead of accepting that the world's cruelty should dictate how we live. She paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. My husband used to say that the only thing worse than taking a risk and failing is never taking the risk at all. I've played it safe my whole life, done what I was supposed to do, followed the rules. And where has it gotten me? Alone, poor, desperate? Maybe it's time to stop playing it safe. The fire crackled between them, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkness. Adohi stood abruptly and walked to the doorway, staring out at the star-filled sky. Eliza watched his silhouette, her heart in her throat, waiting for him to speak, to reject her, to tell her she was being foolish. But when he finally turned back to face her, his expression was softer than she expected. 2 days, he said quietly. We have 2 days before we must leave. Let us not spend them arguing about a future we cannot predict. Let us simply be here in this moment and let the future take care of itself when it arrives. It wasn't an answer, not really. But it wasn't a rejection either. Eliza nodded, accepting the boundary he was setting, the space he needed to think. 2 days, 48 hours before everything changed again. She would make them count. The first of their last 2 days passed too quickly. Eliza spent the morning preparing for travel, sorting through what little they had, deciding what could be carried and what would have to be left behind. Adohi packed supplies for the journey, dried meat and cornmeal, water bladders and blankets. They worked in parallel, speaking little, both aware of the clock running down on their time together. Benjamin seemed to sense something was changing. He clung to Eliza more than usual, watching Adohi with wide eyes whenever the man moved around the dwelling. In the afternoon, Adohi carved a small horse from juniper wood, smoothing it carefully with his knife until it fit perfectly in Benjamin's small hand. The boy clutched it like treasure, running his fingers over the carved mane, the sturdy legs, the proud head. "For the journey," Adohi said, crouching down to Benjamin's level. "So you have a strong horse to ride even when you're tired." Benjamin looked up at him, then suddenly threw his small arms around Adohi's neck, hugging him with the fierce, uncomplicated affection of a child who doesn't understand why adults make everything so complicated. Adohi's arms came up slowly, uncertainly, then wrapped around the boy, holding him close. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. That evening, as the sun painted the canyon walls in shades of crimson and gold, Adohi took them to a place he hadn't shown them before. It was a short walk from the dwelling, up a narrow path that wound between massive red boulders. At the top, the land opened up into a flat area overlooking the entire canyon. The view was breathtaking, miles of layered rock and distant mesas stretching toward a horizon that seemed infinite. "This is where I scattered Desba's ashes," Adohi said quietly. She loved this view. She used to say it reminded her that no matter how small we are part of something vast and eternal. When times were hard, when we were starving at Bosque Redondo, she would close her eyes and describe this place to me. She would make me see it in my mind, remember that beauty still existed somewhere, even if we couldn't reach it. Eliza stood beside him, Benjamin on her hip, and looked out at the landscape. It was beautiful, achingly so. The kind of beauty that made you understand why people fought and died for land, why connection to place could run deeper than blood. "Thank you for bringing us here," she said softly. "For sharing this with us. I wanted you to see it," Adohi replied. "I wanted you to understand why I cannot leave easily. This is not just land to me. It is memory, it is spirit, it is everything my people were before the world changed. Asking me to leave it is asking me to cut away a part of myself." "I know," Eliza said. "I was wrong to ask you to come to Santa Fe. It was selfish of me, thinking only of what I wanted, without considering what it would cost you." She turned to face him fully. "But I want you to know something. These days we've spent together, they've meant more to me than I can express. You've given me hope when I had none. You've treated me with respect when the world told me I deserved nothing. You've loved my son when you had every reason to turn us away. I will carry that with me for the rest of my life, no matter what happens next." Adohi met her gaze, and in the fading light his face was open in a way she'd never seen before. "You have given me something as well," he said. "You have reminded me that healing is not just about herbs and ceremonies. It is about connection, about allowing yourself to care for others, even when caring brings pain. Since Desba died, I have been afraid to feel anything. I told myself I was preserving her memory, honoring her by staying loyal to our life together. But really I was just hiding from the possibility of being hurt again." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "You have made me feel again. And while that is frightening, it is also good." They stood there as the sun sank lower, painting the world in shadows and fire. Benjamin had fallen asleep against Eliza's shoulder, worn out by the climb and the excitement of the day. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled not with tension, but with understanding. They had found something rare and precious in this hidden canyon, a connection that transcended the boundaries society tried to impose. Whether it could survive the journey to Santa Fe, whether it could exist in the harsh light of the outside world, remained to be seen. But for this moment, watching the sunset from a sacred place, it was enough to simply be together. They returned to the dwelling as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Eliza put Benjamin to bed, singing him one of the lullabies that always soothed him to sleep. When she returned to the fire, she found Adohi preparing something different than their usual evening meal. He had brought out dried fruits she hadn't seen before, and he was making a special kind of bread, frying it in a pan over the flames until it puffed up golden and fragrant. "This is fry bread," he explained as he worked. "My grandmother taught me to make it. It is not traditional Navajo food. We did not have wheat before the white men came, but it has become part of our culture. We learned to make something beautiful from what was forced upon us." He placed a piece on a wooden plate and handed it to her. "A small feast for our last night." Eliza bit into the bread, and the taste was wonderful, crispy on the outside, soft within, slightly sweet from the fruit he'd added. "It's delicious," she said. "You should have made this for us before." "Some things are meant for special occasions," Adohi replied. "If we have them all the time, they lose their meaning." They ate slowly, savoring the food and the company. Adohi told her stories of his childhood, of learning to track animals with his father, of the ceremonies and songs that marked the seasons. Eliza shared memories of her own past, of her grandmother who had taught her to sew, of the brief happiness of her marriage before tragedy struck. They talked until the fire burned low, neither wanting the night to end, both aware that morning would come too soon. Finally, when the fire was nothing but embers, and the cold was creeping in, Adohi stood to bank the coals and add wood for the night. Eliza rose as well, preparing to go to her pallet beside Benjamin. But as she passed Adohi, he reached out and gently caught her hand. She stopped, her breath catching, and turned to face him. "If circumstances were different," he said quietly, his thumb moving softly against her palm, "if we lived in a world where a Navajo man and a white woman could build a life together without fear, without judgment, I would ask you to stay. Not for a few days, not temporarily, but permanently. I would ask you to make this your home, to let me care for you and your son. I would ask you to be my family." His eyes held hers, dark and intense in the dim light. "But we do not live in that world. And I will not ask you to sacrifice your safety and your son's future for something that can never be." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "And if I want to sacrifice it anyway? If I think the risk is worth it? Then I would tell you that you are not thinking clearly," Adohi said gently. "I would tell you that love, if that is what this is, should not require such sacrifice. It should not demand that you put yourself and your child in danger. A good man would want better for you than what I can offer." "You are a good man," Eliza whispered. "The best man I've known. And maybe you're right. Maybe the practical choice is to go to Santa Fe, to accept the sisters' help, to build a safe, conventional life for Benjamin. But my heart doesn't care about practical choices. My heart wants to stay here with you." For a long moment they stood there, hands clasped, the space between them charged with everything they felt but couldn't act on. Then slowly, Adohi raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made Eliza's breath hitch. "Sleep," he said softly. "Tomorrow will come soon enough, and with it all the decisions we must make." Eliza nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She withdrew her hand reluctantly and moved to her pallet, lying down beside Benjamin, but not closing her eyes. Across the dwelling, she could see Adohi's silhouette as he settled by the fire. Neither of them slept much that night. They simply lay there in the darkness, both thinking about roads not taken, about futures that might have been if the world were kinder, if history were different, if love alone were enough to overcome the walls that people built between each other. Morning arrived grey and cold, clouds obscuring the sun. Adohi saddled his horse while Eliza dressed Benjamin in his warmest clothes and gathered their few belongings. The mood was somber, heavy with unspoken goodbyes. Even Benjamin seemed subdued, holding tight to his wooden horse and watching the adults with solemn eyes. They were nearly ready to leave when they heard it. A sound that made Adohi freeze, his hand going instinctively to his rifle. Riders, multiple riders, approaching fast. But these weren't soldiers. The whooping cries and the thunder of unshod hooves told a different story. Raiders. Eliza's blood ran cold. Apache, Adohi said, his voice tight. They must have seen our smoke or tracked us somehow. They raid in this area sometimes, taking horses, supplies, anything they can use. He grabbed Eliza's arm, his grip urgent. Get Benjamin. Go into the back of the dwelling. There is a space behind the storage baskets where the wall doesn't quite meet the rock. Squeeze in there and do not come out no matter what you hear. Do you understand?" "What about you?" Eliza demanded, terror making her voice sharp. "I will talk to them," Adohi said. "I speak some Apache. Maybe I can convince them we have nothing worth taking. Maybe they will leave peacefully. But if they do not, if there is violence, you must stay hidden. Protect your son. That is all that matters." He was already pushing her toward the dwelling. Eliza scooped up Benjamin and ran, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She found the space Adohi had described, a narrow gap between the dwelling wall and the natural rock face behind it. She pushed herself and Benjamin into it, ignoring the sharp stones that pressed into her back, pulling storage baskets in front of them to create a screen. Through a tiny gap, she could see a sliver of the dwelling's interior and the doorway beyond. The raiders arrived in a chaos of dust and noise. There were 5 of them, Apache warriors painted for war, armed with rifles and traditional weapons. They surrounded Adohi, who stood in front of the dwelling with his own rifle held low but ready. One of the warriors, older than the others with grey streaking his long hair, spoke in a language Eliza didn't understand. Adohi responded in the same language, his tone respectful but firm. The conversation went back and forth, the Apache warrior's voice growing louder, more aggressive. Adohi remained calm, but Eliza could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his grip tightened on the rifle. Whatever was being said, it wasn't going well. Then one of the younger warriors noticed the supplies Adohi had packed for the journey, saw the food and blankets bundled near the horse. He moved toward them, reaching out to take them. Adohi shifted, placing himself between the warrior and the supplies. He said something sharp, warning. The young warrior laughed, a sound without humor, and shoved Adohi hard. Adohi stumbled back but didn't fall, didn't raise his rifle. He was still trying to de-escalate, still trying to avoid violence. But Eliza could see it in the raiders' faces, in the way they circled closer. They hadn't come to talk. They had come to take what they wanted, and they wouldn't leave without it. The older warrior barked an order. 2 of the younger ones rushed Adohi simultaneously. He managed to knock one aside with the butt of his rifle, but the other tackled him to the ground. The rifle flew from his hands, landing several feet away. Eliza watched in horror as they beat him, fists and boots raining down on his body. Adohi fought back as best he could, landing blows that made his attackers grunt with pain. But he was outnumbered and the outcome was inevitable. Eliza's mind screamed at her to stay hidden, to protect Benjamin, to follow Adohi's instructions. But her body moved before conscious thought caught up. She couldn't watch this. She couldn't hide while they killed him. She thrust Benjamin deeper into the hiding space, whispering urgently, "Stay here. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Mama will be right back." She grabbed the only weapon within reach, a heavy iron pot used for cooking. It wasn't much, but it was something. She burst from her hiding place and ran toward the doorway. The raiders were so focused on Adohi, they didn't notice her at first. She swung the pot with all her strength at the nearest warrior's head. It connected with a solid thunk, and the man dropped like a stone. The others turned, shocked by this sudden appearance of a white woman attacking them. In that moment of surprise, Adohi surged to his feet, blood streaming from his nose and a cut above his eye. He lunged for his rifle, got his hands on it, and fired a shot into the air. The crack of gunfire echoed off the canyon walls, and suddenly everyone froze. Adohi said something in Apache, his voice rough but commanding. He gestured with the rifle, not quite pointing it at anyone, but making it clear he would use it if necessary. The older warrior assessed the situation, his eyes moving from Adohi to Eliza to the supplies and back again. He said something that sounded like a question. Adohi responded, and Eliza caught one word she recognized. Wife. He was telling them she was his wife. The older warrior studied them both for a long moment, then laughed, a sharp bark of sound. He said something else, gesturing to his men. They gathered up the warrior Eliza had hit, who was groaning and holding his head, and backed toward their horses. The older warrior said one more thing to Adohi, something that made Adohi's jaw tighten. Then they mounted up and rode off, taking nothing with them. For several heartbeats after they disappeared, neither Adohi nor Eliza moved. Then Adohi lowered the rifle and turned to look at her, his face a mask of blood and fury. "I told you to stay hidden," he said, his voice shaking. "I told you to protect Benjamin. What were you thinking coming out here? They could have killed you. They could have done worse than kill you." "They were killing you," Eliza shot back, her own voice trembling with adrenaline and fear. "Was I supposed to just watch? Just let them beat you to death while I hid like a coward?" "Yes," Adohi said harshly. "That is exactly what you were supposed to do. Because your life matters more than mine. Your son's life matters more than mine. I am expendable. You are not." "Don't you dare," Eliza said, tears starting to flow now that the immediate danger had passed. "Don't you dare say your life doesn't matter. It matters to me. It matters to Benjamin. You think I could have lived with myself if I'd let you die? You think I could have taken my son and gone to Santa Fe and built a life knowing I'd hidden while the man who saved us was murdered?" Adohi stared at her, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his chin. Then suddenly he was moving toward her, closing the distance between them in 2 long strides. His hands came up to cup her face, and before Eliza could process what was happening, he was kissing her. It wasn't gentle. It was fierce, desperate, fueled by fear and relief and all the feelings they'd been holding back. Eliza kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adohi rested his forehead against hers. "You are the bravest and most foolish woman I have ever met," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You could have died." "But I didn't," Eliza replied. "We didn't. We're both alive. And that warrior I hit with the pot is going to have one hell of a headache. But he'll live too, despite everything. Despite the blood and the fear and the trembling in her limbs." She found herself laughing, a sound edged with hysteria, but real nonetheless. Adohi pulled back to look at her, and incredibly, he was smiling too, a small, wondering smile that transformed his face. "What did the older warrior say at the end?" Eliza asked. "Before they left." "I heard you say wife." Adohi's smile faded, replaced by something more complex. "I told them you were my wife, that we live here together. I thought it might make them leave us alone, might make them see us as a family unit rather than targets." The old warrior, he said he respected that a Navajo man had found a woman brave enough to fight beside him. He said such a woman was worth more than all the supplies we have. Then he said we should leave this place, that Apache raiders will return, and next time they may not be so generous. He paused. He also said that a white woman married to a Navajo will find no peace in the white man's world or the red man's world. He said we are both outcasts now, and we should accept that truth. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Eliza thought about what she'd done, coming out of hiding to save Adohi. She thought about the kiss they'd just shared, the way it had felt right despite everything that said it should be wrong. She thought about Benjamin, still hidden in the back of the dwelling, and about the life she'd been planning to build in Santa Fe, safe and conventional, and utterly empty of the feeling that was flooding through her now. "What if he's right?" she said quietly. "What if we are outcasts? What if we will never fit into either world? What if the only place we belong is here, together, making our own world where the rules are different?" She looked up at Adohi, her heart in her throat. "I don't want to go to Santa Fe. I don't want to leave you. I don't want my son to grow up never knowing the man who saved his life, who taught me what it means to be truly seen and valued. I know it's dangerous. I know it's impractical. I know every rational thought says we should separate and build safer, separate lives. But I can't. I won't. Not unless you tell me you don't want us to stay." Adohi's hands were still on her face, his thumbs stroking gently across her cheekbones, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I want you to stay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have wanted you to stay since the moment I met you, since I saw you stumbling through the snow with your dying child in your arms and recognized something in you that matched something in me. But wanting and having are different things. Can we truly do this? Can we build a life together knowing the world will condemn us for it? Now I think, Eliza said slowly, that we've both spent too much of our lives caring what the world thinks. The world cast you out, sent your people to die in a desert prison. The world treated me like property, like something to be used and discarded. Why should we let that world dictate how we live, who we love, what we build? Maybe it's time we stopped asking permission and started making our own choices. A sound from inside the dwelling made them both turn. Benjamin emerged from his hiding place, clutching his wooden horse, his face streaked with tears. "Mama!" he called out, his voice small and frightened. Eliza rushed to him, scooping him up, checking him for injuries, even though she knew he was physically fine. "It's okay, baby," she murmured. "Everything's okay. We're safe now." Benjamin looked over her shoulder at Adohi, who had followed them inside. The boy reached out one small hand toward the man, and Adohi came closer, letting Benjamin touch his bloodied face. "Hurt," Benjamin said, his lower lip trembling. "Yes," Adohi agreed gently, "but I will heal. Your mama made sure of that. She is very brave." He looked at Eliza. "You are both very brave." They cleaned Adohi's wounds together, Eliza using the skills he'd taught her to treat the cuts on his face and the bruises that were already darkening on his ribs. Benjamin watched solemnly, occasionally patting Adohi's hand as if to comfort him. When they were done, Adohi pulled them both into an embrace, careful of his injuries but needing to feel them close, solid, real. "If we do this," he said quietly, "if you stay, it will not be easy. We will have to be careful, vigilant. Soldiers will come again. Raiders may return. We will face judgment and hatred from both our peoples. Your son will grow up caught between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. Are you prepared for that? Are you strong enough?" Eliza pulled back to look at him directly. "I've been alone and afraid for so long," she said. "I've been judged and found wanting by every conventional measure of worth. I've lost everything I thought I needed to survive. And through it all, I've kept going, kept fighting, kept protecting my son. If I can survive all that, I can survive people's disapproval. What I can't survive is walking away from this, from you, from the chance to build something real and true, even if it's not conventional." Adohi looked at Benjamin, who had fallen, asleep against Eliza's shoulder, exhausted by the fear and drama of the morning. "What about him? What kind of life can we give him here?" "A life with two parents who love him," Eliza said simply. "A life where he learns two languages, two cultures, two ways of seeing the world. A life where he understands that love doesn't follow rules, that family is what you build, not what blood dictates. Maybe that's the best gift we can give him, the knowledge that he can choose his own path, that he doesn't have to fit into boxes other people create." Adohi was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving between Eliza and the sleeping child. Then slowly he nodded. "Then you stay," he said. "You both stay, and we will build something here, something that belongs to us alone. We will make our own rules, our own traditions. We will be a family, not because society says we should be, but because we choose to be." And Eliza felt something loosen in her chest, some tight knot of fear and loneliness that she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there. "We stay," she repeated, and the words felt like a promise, like a vow more binding than any ceremony could create. "We build. We choose each other." In the days that followed, they did exactly that. They repaired the dwelling, making it larger, more suitable for 3 people instead of 1. They gathered supplies for winter, knowing they would need more now. Adohi taught Eliza the names of plants in his language, taught her the songs his grandmother had sung, the stories that contained his people's history. Eliza taught him songs from her own childhood, recipes her grandmother had passed down, the parts of her heritage worth preserving. Benjamin thrived, growing stronger each day, picking up words in both English and Navajo with the effortless ease of childhood. He called Adohi Dada without prompting, and Adohi's face, every time he heard it, was a mixture of joy and pain, of new love and old loss, finally finding peace with each other. They were not a conventional family. They would never be accepted in polite society. But within the red rock walls of their hidden canyon, they were exactly what each of them needed. They were home. Months later, when winter snows blanketed the high country and smoke rose in a steady thread from their chimney, a traveler might have looked at that distant dwelling and wondered who lived there. A Navajo healer, and a white woman and a child who belonged to both of them and neither of them, learning to exist in the spaces between worlds, building something fragile and fierce and absolutely their own. The world outside might condemn them. History might forget them, but in that moment, in that place, they had found something rare and precious. They had found each other. And sometimes in a hard world that took more than it gave, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.